Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
So the deadline's 5 p.m. Oh my, yeah, tightest turnaround ever. Right, shall we get going? Hello. So it was a tale of split captions this week, as those backing the United assets were in clover, whilst for those backing Salah, it looked all over. We're coming at you yet again late at night after the Spurs Everton game rounded off this game week in a fashion that encapsulated it for Salah captains. Definitely, it was boring, and I can't believe I voluntarily put myself through that. Anyway, let's get rolling, so I can get to bed at a reasonable hour. I'm joined by Nick and Anthony, of course. Nick first, you all right?
Hey Tom, yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, the game weeks are probably coming thick and fast, aren't they? But we're finally down to that business end of the season, just 5 game weeks left. Before, of course, we jump straight into the new season due to it being a very, very short summer break. We are Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Twitter at WGTA_FPL for Tom, at WGTA_Nick for myself, and at FPL Stag for Stag. So we're also on Instagram as well if you want to follow us there, WGTA.FPL. So Stag, Anthony, Ant-Man, how are you doing? What's on the agenda for this edition of the pod?
Evening, lads. Nice to join you again. 19 hours from the record to the deadline, so I think that's by far and away the tightest yet. But sure, let's just kick on straight into it, I guess, with our game week reviews we'll be starting with. And so we'll look at this game week, I guess, where we expected so much more with so much imbalanced fixtures, but it didn't really work out that way, did it? We'll dig into the market forces then, which we've been using to frame our main topics for the pod in the last few weeks. And this time it's just about targeting crap teams over the next 5 game weeks. And that's pretty much it. We'll move on to questions and our own transfers and captains, of course, to round off then. But first of all, let's start off with the game week reviews.
Well, let's start off top of the pile, and it's still Nick. He's somehow managed to beat us both, despite, as Anthony said, us both looking like we had decent teams at the start of last week. How did you do, Nick?
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange game week, so I might have outscored you guys, but I didn't get a green arrow. I got a very, very tiny red in the end, 1K drop. But it was just one of those game weeks which just had so many highs, so many lows. It's like I didn't really enjoy it at all. And the main annoyance of mine was the fact that Mason Greenwood ended up rooted to the bench with 13 points, which was quite a big low. And my goalkeeper also didn't keep a clean sheet. That was Pope. So I got the goalie decision wrong yet again, even though I'm still thinking set and forget. But yeah, that Greenwood being rooted to the bench because of Manchester City and Pep being Pep, taking Mahrez off on 59 minutes for 1 pointer, and Kevin De Bruyne coming on to block that. But potentially very, very annoying substitution there. My Wolves guys didn't do too much either. Size 0 and Jimmy 2, but the Mane being the captain, getting that goal, that was definitely the saving grace for the week. Bruno Fernandes, he did the business yet again with 15 points, and also got a cheeky Chaglar Soyuncu clean sheet and little bonus, which is like highlight, and reasonable supporting cast contributions from the likes of Rashford, Pulisic, and Trent Alexander-Arnold. So all in all, kind of a bit disappointed, obviously not to come away with a green arrow, but I'm glad to move on quickly from this game week personally with not too much damage done.
Yeah, well, I did worse than you, as you say, Nick. Only 59 points here, but I'm doing so badly across the season that I got a green arrow. So, the meme with the guy touching his forehead, you can pretty much insert that here. So, a lot of you will remember that I was musing that I was potentially going to go for my free hit before at the end of the last pod. I decided against it, pretty much thinking that I wasn't going to make enough changes to the side that I was going to be putting out otherwise. And I've run the numbers, seriously complex maths, and I would have only got 73 points, including my captain Mane, if I had done that free hit. So to be honest, 14 points benefits off a free hit wouldn't have been a great deal. So we'll go with, I would say I'm pretty happy, I guess. That's probably the great escape from the game week. I transferred out Mason Mount and brought in Pulisic. Solid. He actually got a return. Having a transfer that goes well for once was lovely. But to be honest, look, across my team, it was all standard, all, Martinez in goal, Alexander-Arnold, Fernandes, Salah captain, Pulisic, which was Salah captain, obviously disappointment, Pulisic, Rashford with my points. It's fine. It's annoying. I benched John Egan. That was pretty frustrating. 10 points sitting there. Alex McCarthy was my sub goalkeeper as well, but there was no world where I was going to play him, so I'm not too annoyed about that. But overall, it's another bundle of meh, but not quite as meh as Tom's week.
It's not that bad. It's only 58 overall, 58 net, so 62 minus 4. And there are loads of positive ways I can spin this, okay? So I did captain Salah. I did have 1 pointers from Mahrez and 1 pointer from De Bruyne, and I had Slab Face as my third man nice asset. But what I did do is I did buy Mason Greenwood last minute. So I remember last pod I was saying, I'm going to buy Rashford, I'm going to buy Mahrez. Well, basically, Nick was very, very persuasive with talking about Mason Greenwood. And I realised afterwards I could buy Greenwood, Mahrez and Pulisic in one fell swoop, which I did. So I sold Aubameyang, who got 2 points. At Barnes, who got 2 very late assists, but I never played him anyway. And James McCarthy, who got 1 point. For Greenwood, who got 13 points. Pulisic, who got 6. And Mahrez, who got 1. So that's a 7-point overall upside from doing that hit, which I'm very happy with. Hooray. But as it stands, 58 overall, 62 -4. Not fantastic. McCarthy on the bench, but the same as Stag. I just never played that guy. And, really what this week boiled down to was one moment of immense satisfaction. That was Nick Pope, 2 points. Dean Henderson, 3 points. Hell yes. Popping the champagne right at my HQ, I'll tell you. Just got to carry on, I think. Just carry on as is. I mean, it's not my team isn't particularly bad. I was kind of, as we're going to talk about later on, considering some fairly wholesale changes, but now I've calmed down a bit. I just kind of think it was one of those weeks where it just looked great on paper and it just didn't really work out. If one of us had captained, Fernandez, or had captains Greenwood or Martial, I think we'd have been flying. It was just a case of choosing the wrong captain. Nick obviously did very well with Mane, but I think that's just how it's gone, really. Right, so let's move on. Market forces, Nick. What's going on?
So it's time for market forces, and yet again, it's all about the Manchester United assets. It was Manchester United last week, and again, it's Manchester United now, but this time, slightly different personnel at the top of the charts. It's Mason Greenwood with 290,000 transfers in for the guy that only costs you 4.5 million. He's finally the market has taken note of the young lads who's emerging with that brace against Bournemouth and obviously the goal against Brighton as well, and the fantastic Manchester United fixtures. Great times for him, and obviously very, very cheap from an FPL standpoint. So lots of people now looking at him. But he is swiftly followed by Bruno Fernandes at 138,000 transfers in time of recording. That's back-to-back 15 pointers for Bruno Fernandes. He's now outscored Jesse Lingard for the entire season in just 2 game weeks, because Lingard's only got 25 points over the course of the season. So it really shows what kind of impact he's had since he's joined the club. Only blanked 1 game week, which is obviously the week Tom captained him. Since joining as well. And the other Manchester United player making up that top 5 transfers in is Anthony Martial, who's 4th with 92,000 transfers in, got a goal and 2 assists, 14 points in that Bournemouth demolition. So lots of people looking at him. Obviously, he's another player we've called out saying he's out of position, 8.3 million. The Manchester United assets aren't looking too pricey. And a lot of people now thinking if you don't own Manchester United triple up, you definitely have to now.
Yeah, falling in between those 2 United midfielders, Bruno Fernandes and Tony Martial, is Willian, who now has 4 goals in 3 games, 33 points in those. He's probably soaring too close to the sun at this point. This is remarkable levels of consistency for Willian, but I guess fair play to anybody who did own him for this purple patch of all purple patches for him. And then in amongst defenders, really, I think it's just Azpilicueta and Wan-Bissaka, which I guess just echoes the United sentiment. And in Azpilicueta's case, it's just a few handy returns kind of making him a little bit popular on transfers in.
Yep, and the 5th most transferred in player actually is another young Englishman who's emerging since lockdown, coming out of the break, really looking like a potential FPL asset finally after what feels like years of talking about him, but obviously not being a real asset when it comes to FPL. Phil Foden at 5.2 million, only played 31 minutes in the game against Southampton, but people are still living that performance from the previous week where he got a goal and assist against Liverpool in that 4-0 demolition, and he also got that brace against Burnley as well. So looking like a cheap enabler. And then by the way that sort of Pep been setting up, you have to feel like he's going to start the next game now he's had his break, just because it feels like it's obviously very, very dangerous to try and predict Pep, but it feels like you miss a game, you're going to start the next one at the moment with him. But that rounds up the transfers in. In terms of the transfers out, there's little really to talk about. John Lundstrom still being sold heavily. A lot of people obviously owned him over the course of the season, but he's injured now. 178,000 transfers out. Grealish and Traore also being sold. So Grealish has had 65,000 transfers out. He's actually had 0 attacking returns in the last 5 games since the restart, which isn't a surprise because Villa have been pretty terrible and only managed 2 goals. So a lot of people finally getting rid of him. And interestingly enough as well, in the forward line, Calvert-Lewin, no surprise there, I guess, that he's being sold 57,000 transfers out. He's blanked as well since the restart. But also our man Honest Raul, he's suddenly appearing in the transfers out now, and it's a bit of a talking point perhaps, but 65,000 transfers out, blanked in 2 games in a row, which is very rare for him. But people obviously looking to bring in Mason Greenwood, so he seems to be the fall guy in many cases.
Yep, can't be surprised by that, especially given the price differential. As I said last week, the fact that kind of lots of expensive players have been dispatched as well has meant that people have had loads of money to play around with. So I'm not too surprised that there's a lot of moves and shakes in the transfer market. So to move it on to this week's kind of key topic, and I guess it's in the afterblow of Bournemouth that we've seen the Man United players really shine. It's Operation Target Bournemouth, brackets and the weaker teams. No, it's not Operation Sea Lion on a podcast, but it's close enough. And it's basically born of the fact that I'm 200,000, 220,000 or so. I'm not going anywhere. And FPL JMO asked a question here, and I know he was talking about the next couple of game weeks going up, but I'm going to retrofit what he said and basically ask, is now the time to swerve the template? To do this, I've kind of thought of a strategy, and a few other people have also thought of this, I'm sure, for those looking to mix things up, which is to target Bournemouth. Why Bournemouth? Well, they're awful. They were awful versus Newcastle, absolutely dreadful against United, though United outperformed their XG. And it really goes to that nebulous sort of window into men's souls thing of motivation and heart. Much like the Tin Man, I think they've lost theirs. The stats aren't great either. They've conceded the most goals. In the last 2 game weeks, they've been awful at the back. They've had the highest XGC, the most big chances conceded, and the most shots in the box conceded. So I'm proposing a route to target Bournemouth with captaincies, which may function as a decent Hail Mary for anyone looking for a strategy. So Strike 42912 asks, do we dare consider Kane for Bournemouth? Before this week's match, I'd have said yes. After watching that dross on TV just now, I think no. Spurs' schedule is Monday, Thursday, Sunday, Wednesday, but we know Kane will play. Yeah, so you could feasibly get him in this week, captain him against Bournemouth, or get, I don't know, Bergwijn, Son or something. Vardy in 35 against Bournemouth, so you could, if you bought Kane, you could swap him for Vardy. He's well in the race for the Golden Boot, although he did say in the Athletic he didn't give a toss about that. Maybe he's in the hoots again with Barnsley, you never know. KDB in 36 for any City player, basically. They aren't a bad team, are they? Revolutionary to say that. And in game week 37, you've got Ings. So you've got 4 easy kind of captaincies there that you could do against Bournemouth if you really want to target them. It's very hard to kind of look at different ways forward at this time of the season, I think. And I know that after the game tonight, you're probably not going to be too happy after no shots on target, 2 shots blocked. I know you're probably not going to be looking at buying the defensive midfielder for Spurs, but lads, it is Bournemouth. Could that be a way forward for people to look at things and kind of strategize to change things up? I mean, Nick, you're doing very, very well, but it looks like you've got something to say on this one. Would you trust your man, and would you trust anybody against Bournemouth to do well?
I was going to actually say that Kane put in an excellent performance, not as a defensive mid today, but as a centre-back. When all those corners and free kicks from Everton, it was Harry Kane that was heading it and clearing it away from the box. I think there was about 3 or 4 blocks or clearances that I saw from the Spurs central defender. So
It's everything Chelsea's been missing all season.
Exactly. All things considered, you probably know my opinion already that I think that Kane is not worth the outlay. 10.9 million. It's too expensive, especially for my own team. It would require having to tear it apart, try and fund the money, not only sell most likely Jimenez, but then have to sell one of my power for 5 midfielders. And that's something that I'm not willing to, just for 1 game week, essentially, even though it is a terrible team like Bournemouth. I'm generally happy with my front 8, and I'm not going to tear it apart just to bring in Harry Kane, a man basically that's, since the restart's not managed to outscore Connor Cody, even though he's got a couple of goals himself. So, it's not for me, unfortunately, but I do think, just in general, in regards to this whole idea of targeting teams, I think that is a very, very strong and a very valid strategy that can be applied to the close season, especially when we've only got a few game weeks to play with. We can really sort of hone in on those specific fixtures and not have to worry about what comes next. So, as Tom was saying, Bournemouth have been incredibly poor since the restart, haven't they? I mean, in terms of the match against Manchester United, apparently only Rico had more touches in the opposition half than the entire Manchester United team. And he only had more touches than Lindelof. So Rico had 24 touches in the opposition half, whilst Lindelof had 21 touches in the opposition half. So every other Manchester United player had more touches in the opposition half than any other Bournemouth player, which is just ridiculous stat, just to prove how incompetent they basically were in that game, even though they managed to score a couple of goals. So in my view, we can talk about this perhaps a little bit later, but I am looking at one Spurs player, and that is Serge Aurier. You'll be surprised to know.
Walking
the guy,
red card.
He is, yeah, he's definitely going to get sent off, but some of his stats are pretty good. He's had 7 assists, which is only Robertson and Trent have had more this season. Only Son out of all the Spurs players has had more assists as well. So if you want to target an attacking Spurs player, why not just get this guy in defence?
Okay, before this game week, I would have said, target the bad teams. But the fact of the matter is that, I considered free hitting because there were quite a few imbalanced fixtures, as I flagged in the intro, and that wouldn't have worked here. But the thing is that Bournemouth have been consistently crap, like nobody else in the league since the restart. So, look, Tom's gone through the stats that since the break, no team's conceded more than them. The 12 goals that they've conceded, they're third for big chance conceded, they're second for expected goals conceded. They're not doing well. Norwich are poor, but they're not actually that loose. They conceded 4 to Arsenal, but they put a blunderbuss to their own foot for both of Aubameyang's goals, and that really added the shine to that particular scoreline. Sheffield United, who were, and still are in terms of statistics, one of the worst teams since the restart, seem to have copped on quite a bit between beating Spurs and getting a boring and unimpressive, but draw nonetheless against Burnley. And then Villa, they're defensively much, much tighter since the return as well. Like we saw this against Liverpool. I know you might scream, but you weren't saying that last pod, Stag. And fair enough, I wasn't. But they are much tighter since the restart. They've had a clean sheet against Sheffield United. That's fair enough. They only conceded 2 to Chelsea. They conceded only once to the rampant, inform, unstoppable Steve Bruce's army, and once to Team Matt Doherty, and then twice to Liverpool. So, that's pretty solid going. And they're not the sort of team that you'd be targeting defensively. And then there's Watford, and they're not impressive, but they don't look like somebody who's going to be drubbed, even though they're struggling to pick up points. So then you're really left with the only team to target is Bournemouth, unless you want to play the lottery of who's going to be crap in their given week. Genuinely, anybody except for, it seems, Manchester United are prone to having an incredibly off week since this restart.
Yep, no, I think you're right. I think that Villa before the restart would have been the prime team to be really aiming for. So they had, between game week 1 and game week 30, a frankly ridiculous 62 XGC, which is 4 more than the second versus West Ham. And in terms of shots, they were just conceding so many shots back then. They conceded 531 shots, which is an astonishing 61 more than Norwich. So they were letting in shots like nobody's business. Don't know what Dean Smith has done. Don't know whose wife John Terry slept with, but that defence is definitely tightening up.
Yeah, big man Bakar on Twitter actually, he had a great stat which was pointing out that in the 4 game weeks before the COVID break, Villa were conceding on average, I think it was 11 shots per game, and now that's down to 5 shots per game. It's a pretty big difference.
Oh yeah, it certainly is. And I think, I don't know, I think because there's such an obvious set of captains against Bournemouth, I mean, if Spurs had done very, very well today, I think I'd be saying, yep, you know what, get Kane in, just do it, give it a go. But you've got the Vardy in 35, you've got Man City in 36, you've got Ings in 37, and maybe Richarlison and DCL in 38. But I mean, you've still got kind of at least three or four decent kind of captains there, right?
You said Richarlison, it nullified everything.
Yeah.
DCL as well.
Yeah, I know. Maybe is what I said,
my
right?
brain.
But I guess maybe this game week though is probably not on, and because you've got the likes of KDB and Bruno, it's probably not going to be the thing that you do. And the other side of planning, because obviously it's WGTA, so we've got to give the other side of the argument. There is the fact is that if you do have a plan that you stick to, you kind of fall prey to a couple of things. One is sunk cost fallacy. So you say, I've come this far with my plan, I'm going to keep going, even though things may be going wrong elsewhere that you should probably fix. And you've got the unspoken side of confirmation bias, which is where I confirm what I'm looking for. Yes, everyone knows that. But there's the other bit, which is where I disregard stuff that doesn't back me up. So I get the focusing effects. I'm focusing too much on the outcome, and I don't really look at what's in front of me, which could be that, maybe I could be getting Vardy in 35, but Jimenez has just scored a couple of goals, so why would I be selling him to focus through my plan, if that makes sense? But either way, I think that could be quite useful for some people, Vardy, KDB, Ings. Anyway, Jimenez, we have mentioned a couple of times, and Jimenez would have been the guy who would go for Kane. I'm not doing that now before anyone asks me and says, why are you selling Jimenez, mate? But could it be the time where we're moving on from a few players who were part of the established template? So, Jimenez and Matt D are players who have been sized as players who could leave, and Liverpool as well. Like, I've seen a lot of people start to kind of think, Salah could leave my team. They look a bit rubbish. It took them absolutely ages for them to have a shot. Neil good to us. Is it time for us to disinvest from the Scousers? Let's start with Jimenez first, though. Anthony, the likes of Jimenez, is it time for them to go? Are we just being fickle? Last week we were saying, why haven't you got him? This week we might be saying, yeah, you could get rid of him if you want to.
I think that sort of inconsistency is something that's almost happening to everyone on almost every single podcast. I think we're definitely taking a U-turn on a view that we might have expressed the previous week, and that's not intentional, and that's not us being fickle. I think that's just more a reflection of what's going on in the league at the moment and how unpredictable yet still at the end of the day predictable it is. But Wolves are one team who have kind of gone in the opposite direction maybe, and whilst Jimenez obviously has his goals since the restart, he hasn't been particularly good. I had a look at the stats from Wolves just as an attacking unit. So in the 4 games before the lockdown hit, they scored 6 times. So it's 4 goals since the lockdown, so you wouldn't think, oh, big difference there. No. But it's when you kind of just get into the even slightly granular detail that you notice that Wolves are performing much worse. They were in the 4 games before the lockdown, 3rd in terms of shots in the whole league, 3rd in terms of shots in the box. They were 2nd for big chances, and they were 3rd in terms of XG. In the 4 games after the restart, in scoring 4 goals, of course, half of those coming from Jimmy, they've been 11th in terms of shots, 10th in terms of shots in the box, only 13th in terms of big chances, and they've been 10th in terms of XG as well, which was 4.5. So there's a real drop just relative to the rest of the league there, with relatively similar fixtures as well. If you want to go and look at them, I have them in front of me here. It was before the lockdown, it was Leicester, Norwich, Spurs, Brighton, 6 goals there. Since the lockdown, we've had West Ham, Bournemouth, Villa, Arsenal. Bournemouth are crap, and they're helping everyone's stats, and yet they're still only after getting 4 goals in this whole time. So Wolves have definitely dropped off, not so much defensively. They've been really able to stand on their defensive metrics, really, and that's what's getting them wins as opposed to draws. Like, they were drawing an awful lot of games at the start of the season, you might remember, because they'd get their 1 goal, but they couldn't keep it out. Whereas now they're at least keeping it out. They get their 1 goal, and they tend to get their win then. So, look, there is a cause to sell him, but of course, the fact of the matter is that everyone bloody has him.
Yeah, I think for myself, I'm potentially going to be benching him. Though I'm not going to be selling him. I think this is the whole situation I've ended up giving myself with this bench.
Risky, Greenwood bench.
Well, I want to play. Bench. Well, I want to play Mason Greenwood. That's just the thing. So they've got Aston Villa obviously up next, and even though, as we just mentioned, Aston Villa have been a little bit more defensively solid since the break, I still think, considering how sort of brilliant Manchester United have been, and Mason Greenwood as well, I think he has to start for me next game week. But I do feel it does feel very much a risk, because even looking at him, there's the next fixture is Sheffield United away, and before the break I'd have said, well, Sheffield United are so incredibly solid, but you've got the likes of John Egan. I think he got sent off in one of the games, didn't he? But you had Jack O'Connell injured, and they haven't quite looked the same defensive force that they were pre-COVID. In the last 4 matches, they've conceded sort of 20 shots on target, which only Bournemouth, Watford, and Norwich conceded more, and 45 shots as well. Again, only Bournemouth, Norwich, and Watford conceded more. And they've had some pretty poor performances defensively as well. Dean Enson's managed to bail them out a couple of times, but it does feel like he could easily get a couple of goals against them, and that is my concern there. But I think I still advise against not selling really and having patience. As we said, it was just 2 game weeks ago. Everyone was talking about captaining him, and I captained him, and he got a return from me. And now we're all talking about selling him. It does feel a little bit fickle, perhaps, but there's just so many options out there at the moment, isn't there?
I think you're probably right, and I'm very, very glad actually that Kane didn't do very well tonight, because I think that I would have been impetuously moving Jimmy to Kane. I think I probably would have been doing that and just kind of falling into that sunk cost fallacy trap I mentioned and thinking, yeah, I'm going to go for it. As it stands, I think that probably he does deserve another chance, Jimmy. And as you've mentioned as well, Sheffield United have not been particularly great. As Staggs mentioned, Wolves haven't been particularly great either. The thing is that you've still got that kind of talisman factor with him. If they do get anything, it is likely to be him. Sheffield United, I mean, without Henderson, they had that terrible game week, which has impacted everything. But I mean, really, you've got to be hoping for a return, at least in that game. But to be honest, he is looking like the fall guy to kind of follow through with this Operation Target Bournemouth thing in general. I am looking at kind of popping him on for Vardy after this game week, just for that Bournemouth game and giving Vardy the captaincy. But I think Jimenez at least gets one more week for me. And the big issue, of course, is that everybody bloody owns him. It's just, again, at 200k, do I want to be owning players that everybody bloody owns, like him and Salah? Or do I want to be moving him on? This week, I probably want to be keeping him. But in general, I think moving on is a good idea. But moving on to the likes of Liverpool, Salah, TAA, as I mentioned earlier, Neil Gupta asked us, is it time to disinvest? That's a bit more of a thornier subject, isn't it, Nick? I mean, you're always the sort of guy who sticks on these sorts of high-ticket, high-scoring players. I love it. You're
always the one who has the players that get all the points.
Exactly. Nick, you always seem to be doing very well because of the fact that you don't think about FPL every 5 seconds of the day. What are you doing with Liverpool players? I'm guessing you'd just be telling people to leave it alone if they're thinking of moving out the Liverpool boys.
Yeah, I would not be selling your Liverpool assets right now. I know they're quite expensive, but just over the course of the entire season, they've proved their value again and again, week in, week out. They had that dodgy game, obviously, against Manchester City, where they're all still pissed from their party. But apart from that, they've been excellent, haven't they? And I know Salah owners will be a little bit disappointed with the assist, but if you're a Mane owner, if you had the double defense, you'd have been thrilled this week. It'd been another great week for you. And I personally don't think necessarily they're the best options for the captain at the moment, but I really don't see there should be a rush to disinvest with Brighton and Burnley, and especially in those games. There's such strong chances for clean sheets there. So both teams, they are quite defensively solid generally, but their offences are absolutely horrible. Burnley are currently missing Wood and Barnes, and that's reflected by the fact that their 27 goal attempts is the lowest of all teams in the last 4 matches since the restart. Brighton not far behind with only 35, and when you take out Neil Maupay from the UK, you can't see anyone else in that team getting a single goal, can you? Apart from maybe a Lewis Dunk header, but even that's unlikely with Virgil van Dijk marshalling the Liverpool defence. So I think if you have double defence in Liverpool, certainly stay there. If you have Mane or Salah, I wouldn't sell one. Perhaps if you had both Mane and Salah, that might seem a little bit aggressive. If you don't have one of the Manchester United midfielders or Manchester City midfielders, then maybe you could sell one of them and use that money elsewhere. But otherwise, I'd say hold on to your Liverpool players.
Honestly, like for me, I get maybe this echoes what Tom was saying, that he's at 200k, so if you're looking at ownership and stuff, he needs to make a move. And at 800 something k, I think I need to make far bigger moves. And with that in mind, I guess I have been actually considering selling Salah and going without any Liverpool attackers, which kind of feels a little bit crazy when it's Brighton up next, who I think probably are safe after the weekend, and I think could be a good candidate for an on the beach team from now on. And honestly, Burnley, especially in an extra week's time, could fall into that category too. And honestly, then they play Arsenal and they could bloody on the beach as well. So with that in mind, you're always kind of fearful that the day you sell a Salah or a Mane is kind of the day that it comes home to roost. And as you say, Nick, if you were doubled up on Liverpool defenders, you were delighted after the weekend. It didn't make any difference to you that they were offensively slow for an hour, 70 minutes, and then ticked into gear enough to just well secure the 3 points.
Yeah, I'm in a really awkward position actually. Now you put it that way, because I'm 200k, but the kind of the opening lament kind of felt like it was probably better coming out of your mouth stack than mine actually. And I don't know, like looking at the Liverpool numbers, I mean, I completely appreciate what Nick's saying about these guys having long-term value. But pre-restart, Liverpool were second behind City basically for everything. So the things we really care about in terms of going forward, they were second for XG, second with big chance created, second shots on target. But since, it's not been that great, and we've definitely seen that if you've been watching any Liverpool. They've stuttered over the line rather than winning at a canter, haven't they? So in terms of those equivalent figures, they're now seventh for XG, below the likes of Newcastle and Southampton and crap teams like Arsenal as well. They're equal sixth for big chances created, equal with the likes of Aston Villa and West Ham, and they're seventh for shots on target, behind again Newcastle, Southampton, and West Ham too. So, I mean, is it the fear factor with them? Is it the fear of missing out, which is why you are holding them? I think it might be. I mean, obviously, you are going to be absolutely pounded by not owning them. But witness what happened with Vardy this week. Like, he scored a couple of goals, and there wasn't everybody across social media go, "Oh my god, Vardy scored. We've all been kicked in the arse. We need to buy him back and made a terrible mistake." Everyone's moved on now. Maybe it's the case that looking at Liverpool, it's just that kind of residual fear with them and the fact that we still own them. But maybe overall, it's the case that there is definitely a case to get rid of them if you are looking to kind of make those moves upwards. I don't know where you go at the moment, apart from maybe Raheem Sterling. I'm guessing that Salah to Sterling is probably going to be a really popular move this week once the transfers are updated, because it's quite an easy one to do.
Or Salah to Mahrez and then fund your Kane transfer in.
Don't think so. But I guess just to round off this section, I've mentioned Operation Target Bournemouth, and I've mentioned the fact that maybe the likes of Liverpool and maybe stalwarts like Jimenez are becoming a little bit loose in terms of their foothold in our team. Is it just the fact that we're in the hinterland of the season now, where strategies like this are viable? We can tear at what we know, and we can just kind of say, you know what, let's just roll with the weeks, roll with the punches. As Stag, as you mentioned, things have changed week to week on the pod, and we just look like we're flip-flopping. But it's just because things are moving so fast that coming up with strategies in terms of long-term strategies is just so difficult to do, isn't it? So, I mean, is it just the case it's not like the regular season? Just go with the flow, tear out what you know, and just try to, aim for the moon, I suppose, of what your moves are.
Yeah, I think there isn't much of a case really for a long-term strategy any longer, just because we've hardly got any game weeks left anyway. We've got 5 game weeks, but people like myself, it's actually 4 if you factor in that I'll be free hitting in game week 38. So it does change things a little bit, that I can really start to focus my transfers on particular matches, perhaps, as opposed to looking at the longer picture. For instance, as I mentioned, I'm thinking about bringing in Serge Aurier, which might not necessarily look like a very, very strong and a good long-term move ultimately, but it will be effective if I do deploy a targeting team strategy. It's the same with looking ahead, so game week 36, 37, I definitely could bring in like a player like Danny Ings for that game week 36 match against Brighton, and then captain him maybe even in 37 for Bournemouth. And I've not owned the guy all season, and I certainly can see that as a upcoming transfer for me. So certainly I think this type of strategy is very much viable currently.
I think, look, usually this is a podcast where we're talking about longer term strategies. And I think, as you say, Nick, this is a time where targeting just individual fixtures, I think we've maybe identified that targeting individual fixtures is difficult unless they're against Bournemouth, but maybe on a more weekly basis you kind of know who should be crap in a following game week. I think just this game week it's particularly tough to work that out, but maybe something as well we haven't been able to see, and I think it's because there's been so much ebb and flow between performances, and I think that's to do with fatigue and the time between games. It's to do with game-changing injuries as well. I think have had a bit of a factor in quite a few games that we've seen. It makes it very hard to work out who's on the beach, who's out of form, who's playing poorly. Like, maybe it could be Palace now. They're pretty mid-table and just getting along. Everton lack urgency. Burnley are still stubborn as ever, but just can't attack. Brighton now look safe. Maybe they're going to fall apart. there's Spurs, Sheffield, Arsenal. They're all in this zany hinterland, to use that Tom word from a minute ago, where you don't quite know what's going to happen with them. And because it's Spurs, we're considering Harry Kane, but should we be considering him any more than anybody else because he is effectively a centre back? And even, sorry, we kind of just talked down Liverpool completely, and I think we've forgotten the fact that they did put in one immense performance since the break against Palace. And that is something which kind of makes me very fearful of selling someone like Salah. And it means that someone, and City as well, of course, having put through one immense performance against Liverpool, it means that, like, you know, they have it in the tank.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
And Wolves limping along the whole time. Are they targeting the Europa League and trying to peak later because their most important games realistically are now in August?
I mean, there's always kind of the underlying truth, which is that these teams, they have the ability, as we were saying before the season restarted, they've got on paper fantastic players and they can turn it on when they want to. It's just, do they want to? And obviously it's a nebulous sort of win-lose to men souls thing, as I've said. We just don't know. They do have it in them, but could you be better served? I don't know, if you don't own Bruno Fernandes, or you want to double up and buy Martial and you've got Salah or Mane, and that's the way you get there. Absolutely, that does make sense to me.
But I'm not even sure if I was one of the camera crew that's somewhere in that Spurs dressing room recording the Amazon documentary. I don't even think they know how Kane will play this weekend, or what sort of form they're in, or what's going on with Spurs. Like, it's
yeah, no, I think you could, we could very easily be saying target Bournemouth and then find that they go on a 4-match winning run now. It's very difficult to do. But either way, kind of just to round the section off before we go to the break, it is just a case of kind of reacting to what's going on at the moment and trying to find a way that could help you plot something different. Because I guess if you are doing it very well, it just makes sense to kind of stick to a kind of quite a solid and stable plan. And I think there will be elements of targeting Bournemouth anyway, when people do. So, for example, game week 36, everybody recapturing a City asset against Bournemouth. But things like, with Vardy in 35, giving Danny Ings a go in 37, these are things that maybe could transform your hinterland into a wonderland. Just an idea anyway. Right, let's take a break and move on to the mini-league questions after this.
Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
So we're back, and it's time, of course, to catch up with the Who Got the Assist mini-league. And Stag, you've got the numbers. Who's top? Who's doing well? Who's doing badly?
Yeah, we'll expedite things this week and just do a top 5, I think. So soaring up from 15th to 5th is Mark Bird with his team Tweety Dreamers. 85 points this week, Captain Fernandez, solid going. He's joined 5th with Adam Warner's Berry 94. They've 76 points, Captain Martial, solid going again. Down from 3rd to 4th, having already been 1st, is Manil Javri with his team The Cop, 52 points this week. So that's even worse than me and Tom. Salah captaincy, explaining most of that. Alex Coates is up from 6th to 3rd with his team Haller at Me, 83 points. He captained Fernandez. Adi Mansour is 2nd, holding position with 59 points this week. He was on his wild card as well, so particularly disappointing for him, but hopefully he's well set up for the final few game weeks. And holding position up top is Jake Gallagher with his team Sheffield Wednesday, 74 points. Tony Martial, captain, carrying him right up there at the top. Otherwise, interesting players in his team, I guess. Martinez, Alexander-Arnold, Bruno Fernandes, Sadio Mane, Martial captain, as I said. And that's about it. He had McCarthy on his bench, all right, and that would have improved his points tally, but nothing else really.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I think this feels like one of those weeks, really, wasn't it? But I mean, well done to the guys all in the top 5. Yeah, Jake, still getting it right basically every week. I'm guessing he was sat there like we were. Oh, get Man United or Liverpool? Man United, Liverpool. Went with Man United, Martial. It's just difference really of what happens when you're doing very well, I suppose. Jealous of him as well. He's got Aubameyang to sell, so God knows what he's going to do with all that money. Excellent stuff.
He's probably going to go for United triple up since he doesn't have it.
Crazy, isn't it? Absolutely mental. Right, let's move on then to the questions this week. And I feel like these are all very, very similar to questions we've been getting for a while on the way. So all similar themes. First one is disinvest at the back. So flipping last week's question on its head, the same people who asked us one question have asked us the opposite. Desperately Seeking Duzan, Alan and James Kroll both now ask if big at the back has died a quick death, and therefore if it's time to default to free at the back with clean sheets diminishing. Times they are changing, aren't they? I don't know. You've got to be asking yourself, if I go first, if you want to be making these sorts of changes now, if there's an essential need to do it. So, for example, if you're upgrading, I don't know, a 6.5 million midfielder, God knows who that would be, to Martial or something, you need to sell someone like Matt D to make that happen. Absolutely do that. If you are going to just be shuffling the pack and using precious free transfers to mess around with stuff, I just wouldn't do it. So stuff like Trent, just leave him there, I think, unless you really need the money. Like, I think we're getting to that point now where free transfers are so scarce that you really need to use them in the place where they're needed and not be messing around with these sorts of guys. Just because I think it's just got to the point now where certain members of your team are just going to be fixed members of your team now, and that's just the way it is. You're gonna have to accept it unless you want to take massive hits, which I don't think anybody really wants to be doing. So yeah, the likes of Charlie Taylor, the likes of Romain Saiss, the likes of, unfortunately for me, Slabhead Maguire are going to stay in my team like a Moe statue. What do you guys reckon?
Honestly, like I could very kind of just facetiously be like, yeah, big as back, it's dead. Yeah, no, it's actually alive again. Yeah, like that's kind of the way it's been kind of going week in, week out. I think the only thing I might add with disinvest at the back, okay, sure, that might make sense if you look at certain teams, but you might just say that Liverpool maybe are struggling going forward, but they have been, as Nick pointed out earlier in the show, quite consistent at the back. And so if you just doubled up on Liverpool defenders, that could be just a pretty handy way to get your points. Virgil van Dijk got a brace against Brighton last time they played them. So, like there's a lot to be said for their attacking talent. We obviously know what their wing backs can do as well. So I wouldn't necessarily say disinvest at the back is the rage, but of course there are so many, basically Manchester United midfielders and attackers in general doing so well that money is flowing forward for sure.
Certainly, I'd agree with both of you in terms of sort of the trends. We can't say, oh, it's big at the back, it's back. Oh no, it's gone again, week in, week out. I feel like it changes weekly. You should probably stick with the players you've got, and those ones are doing well. And then we could flip this question on its head a little bit as well. As I mentioned, the Liverpool defence, double clean sheet. You'd be happy with your big at the back strategy if you own Azpilicueta. I know a couple of the guys in the mini league, Sean and Banana Nose Maldonado, both own Azpilicueta and got a 12-point rewards from him there. So you could argue that brings Chelsea back into the argument with the big at the back. So that with matches against Crystal Palace, Sheffield United, and Norwich up next, that could be plenty of clean sheets there. So we could be talking about bringing in a Chelsea defender and having another premium defender in your team. So I think there's certainly flip sides to both arguments, and it'll be foolish for us to go, yes, it's back, no, it's gone, yes, it's back, no, it's gone each week.
Stay in, but don't stay in. Go out, but don't go out.
Yeah,
it's the pub. Be responsible. Yes.
You get plenty of FPL flip-flopping on Twitter anyway, so maybe we won't give you more of it here.
Exactly. I do wonder next season whether it's going to be, again, what we go with at the beginning. I'm guessing it probably will be after doing the value stuff over what's looking like a very, very short summer period, but nonetheless after doing the value stuff. I think that we did get unlucky with Alisson getting injured, didn't we, Nick? Especially, which kind of destroyed big at the back. I mean, if Liverpool had kept 4 or 5 clean sheets to begin with, I think that we'd be laughing. Big at the back would have been one of the things that defined the season. As it stands, Adrian being a prat is what's completely destroyed it for us.
And Laporte getting injured.
Yes, and Laporte getting injured indeed. That destroyed Edison, didn't it? How time flies, huh? Next question. Triple threat. FPL Meta, who does a very good infographic on the template team on Twitter, asks which teams are actually worth tripling up on, if any. So many people went with triple Wolves, who just lost to Arsenal. I've got triple Wolves, so yeah, I felt that one. And this week, many are preparing triple City, who just lost Southampton. Lots of people have squeezed onto triple United. I think all 3 of us are on triple United. And indeed, there's 3 hosts on WGTA these days. Should you triple? What do you guys reckon?
I think the triple United is a certainty. I think that's obvious, especially with their prices. It's affordable, and their form and fixtures up until the end of the season. Just triple up on United if you haven't already. Just make sure you bring in another Manchester United player. And I think you could definitely make a case as well for either Manchester City or Liverpool. Sure, both teams don't seem to be in the best of form. Well, City had this sort of game against Southampton, which they lost, which was kind of a bit odd. And Liverpool, as we saw, we got smashed by Manchester City. But I still think there's a strong case that you could be tripled up on either of those teams. Triple Liverpool, as I've said, I'm pretty positive about it still, has been, successful all season. I wouldn't break that formula. And with Manchester City, their fixtures are just ridiculous, aren't they? Newcastle at home, Brighton away, Bournemouth at home, Watford away, Norwich at home. That is just like excellent fixture run right until the end of the season. So you certainly can make a case of like, De Bruyne or Mahrez, maybe throw Phil Foden in there as well. There's not, or even Raheem Sterling or someone like that could come in as well. So certainly a strong case, maybe not Gabriel Jesus, but there's certainly a strong case for tripling up on Manchester City as well with that run.
Yeah, to be honest, the only thing I would have added, had Nick not said City, onto Liverpool and Man United, would have been City. And I guess maybe to flesh that out a tad more, is that the thing with City, it's something we saw against Southampton and something that Pep has picked up on. He described the game as a resumen, or like recap of the whole of Man City's season. It's kind of one of those games where their team is so based on picking up goals by players who arrive into the box. It's often the classic cutback finish that City apply, but there's, slightly other types of kind of arriving into the box goals that they tend to score as well. And when they stop working and they don't score, either through that or just, some sort of capitalizing on some kind of mistake, they tend to panic and start crossing like mental. And we saw that again against Southampton. I think they even threw Laporte up front at the end to try and get a goal, which I think says it all about how desperate they started to get. So in spite of having all the best stats in terms of attacking stats, better than Liverpool all season, as Tom mentioned earlier in the pod, this happens to them from time to time. And so I don't necessarily think that it's something that you should be panicking about. This is the same City, in many ways, that we've been seeing all year, just lacking that little bit of class that they had in previous years where they were able to get up near 100 points. But at the same time, still with the ability to put 7 past pretty much anyone in the league.
Pretty much it. I've literally written for this question, Manchester's. I think that's probably it, isn't it? As you can tell, I've been very busy at actual work today, sadly. But yeah, I mean, like at any given time, you probably have one triple up in your team, maybe two. It's very unorthodox at the moment that we've got triple United. I've thought triple Wolves, could have triple City, and you probably could have double triple Liverpool still. I'm looking at a lot of free hit teams, for example, and a lot of wildcard teams. People have literally got stakes in 4 matches, and that's it. Like 4 matches basically decide their entire outcome for the game week. Maybe it's because I just like to diversify my risk portfolio. There's one for Nick there. But I just look at that and just think, it's just too much for me. Like, I like to have players dotted around. And as it stands, as the guys have said, you can't look past either of those Manchester teams for your triples. But beyond that, I think it's just open season. There's so many choices, so many things you could possibly do. I mean, I say so many choices. I think there's actually a narrow scope of choices. But within that scope of choices, you can do many different things. Yeah, the triple United, triple City is incontrovertible, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
A high-performing penny stock there in Mason Greenwood in particular.
Exactly. Right, let's move on to next one, Chips Riddance. So the chips have become a bit of a millstone now, aren't they? With unpredictability abounding. Late Riser asked, when is best to play his free hit? I've got bench boost as well. Oh, what the hell are we going to do with these? Where are you guys? What have you guys got left? Anthony, you've got both of them, haven't you? Bit bench boost and free hit, and Nick's got free hits. What are we doing? Can we help Late Riser here first? What should we do with his free hit? Both of you the free hit. What are you doing?
So I've identified 2 game weeks, I think, where the old free hit could come in handy. One is the classic game week 38. Why? Because all the games are at the same time. So team news might actually be a massive benefit there. It's also statistically a higher scoring game week than average is every year. There are stats all over the place online. I could dig them up, but I didn't have time before this pod, so don't have them right now, but I will on the eve of game week 38. And it could be a double game week if something mad happens. It is 2020, of course, so anything could happen, and there could yet be a double game week there. There probably isn't any other scope for there to be one. The other game week that looks particularly good for a free hit, I think, is game week 35. You've got Liverpool at home to Burnley. You've got Chelsea facing Sheffield United, I guess, whose form we'll get a better idea of as time goes on. City play Brighton, who should be 100% on the beach at that point if they don't prove to be already this coming game week. United have Southampton, and Leicester also play Bournemouth, so that was the Jamie Vardy captaincy week. And then there's a North London derby in there as well, which tends to have its own kind of madness all the time, where there's somebody tends to score well. And if you want to get your Jared Bowen, Mikel Antonio pick, they play Norwich.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm very much an advocate of the game week 38 free hit. just knowing that team news, just having that detail. It's not guaranteed, of course, but just potentially having that detail if you're following Twitter and some of the accounts on there, just knowing who's going to start can make a huge difference in that final game. We can just give that final push for your team, something to look forward to for that final game week as well. For instance, if I know that Raheem Sterling starting for Manchester City in that home match against Norwich, he'll be a fantastic player just to come in for that final game week. Perhaps not many people actually own him and captain him and really shoot for the moon in that final game week. So that's kind of the approach that I'm taking. I don't have my bench boost, but I think you called that 35. I think that'd be a pretty decent week for the bench boost potentially, but often it does depend on who's in your team, who the current personnel are in your 15, and then trying to work it around the fixtures there, because it might be that your team looks fantastic for a bench boost in game week 36 because you've got some Everton defender and they've got Aston Villa at home or something along those lines. So very much depends on your team. And if you've still got your wild card, just wild card. Why do you still have it? Use it. Get rid of it.
Get rid. GTFO. I think there's some good advice there in terms of the free hit. I think that being mindful of the FA Cup maybe might be one thing, and also being mindful of the resting might be one thing as well. But yeah, I think both of them are probably good junctures in which to do it, as in both ones Anthony suggested, and also Nick with 38. If you do have your bench boost left, I kind of am tempted to use it as soon as possible. I'm very tempted to use it this week. So I've got, it's not Mick McCarthy, I don't know why I was about to say that. I've got Alex McCarthy. He's not in the hole, he's in the goal. But I've got Alex McCarthy against Everton, Dominic Calvert-Lewin against Southampton, Taylor against West Ham, and then Saiss against Sheffield United. And I'm tempted to use it this week. The thing is, if I don't use it now, the next time I can probably use it is game week 37 when all the fixtures align. Oh, I don't know. It's an underwhelming time to use bench boost anytime. I think if it's not a double game week, and there's no double game week left, maybe it's very uncreative of me not to go with the bench boost in the restart, but that's just the way it is. I think I'm going to hold it into a game week 37. I think now, and hope for the very, very best, just because there's a bit of a gap between the end of game week 37 and game week 38. Oh, it is difficult, and I think the longer you leave your chips, the more you're likely to see rotation, especially amongst the Man City and Wolves. But I guess Wolves are becoming less of a factor in our chip strategies, but Man City definitely will be with that. But they've got Champions League coming up, so yeah, it's tough, isn't it? It's more a case of what suits your team, I guess, and how you appraise the schedule ahead without becoming Nick. Right, next question. Needless hits. Inglorious FPL asks how justified it is to take hits in the coming game weeks. What do you guys think with respects to points? Is it worth it? I think I definitely saw this was being mentioned by a little bit on FPL Twitter this week, just because the fact is, and Nick and I think we've spoken about this sort of a fair bit back in the days of yore. Like it leaves you a goal down taking a hit. I mean, that's just kind of the bold facts of the matter. And it does have two benefits, which are it brings forward a transfer, so you can kind of rush your strategy or rush your upcoming plan, and it kind of gives you an extra transfer as well, which is why you've got to take the sacrifice of the points hit. Both can be valuable, but we've got a really short time left, as we've spoken about. And again, we've spoken about this a lot for long-term listeners, but you know that you've got to outscore who you sell by at least 5 points to make it worth it, unless it's a non-player, of course, you've got blank or an injury or something. So, I don't know, for example, if I was selling Raul Jimenez and I was buying Harry Kane on the hit, if Jimmy got a 2-pointer, that means that I need Kane to get a 7 for my hit to be profitable. Yeah, I wish I had a percentage for how often you do profitable hits, but I guess you make it difficult for yourself, don't you? With taking a hit, and you also increase what the statos call variance, or the ability for you to be pissed off by the fact you've made a decision. So, what do you guys reckon? Is it worth taking a hit at this point in the season?
Yeah, I was going to raise that exact same point actually that you raised there, Tom, in terms of the sort of the -4, how it kind of like puts you on the back foot the entire game week. And I certainly felt that this game week with my hit, even though I got 68 points, it meant that it was still a red arrow for me somehow, just because of that -4, and it does hang over you all game week, and you feel like you're constantly behind on points and struggling to keep up personally. And ideally for me, it was quite useful doing that -4 as like a bit of a mini wild card. But ideally for myself, I'm going to try and avoid taking any more hits now for the rest of the season, and leave it like that, and hopefully nothing forces my hand, because sometimes you have to do these sort of enforced -4s if you have some sort of injury crisis. But generally, it's it does hang over you, and even my hit actually didn't pay off in the end technically, because one of the players I sold, Stuart Armstrong, somehow managed to get an attacking return, and Riyad Mahrez only got 1 point. So even though Pulisic got 6 points, it didn't work out for me in the end, unfortunately. So sometimes the hits do feel needless, even though it was quite exciting to do this mini wild cards and do free transfers in one game week. It's not always that viable, personally.
I'll keep my answer short with sweet, because I think you guys have summed up the maths of it quite nicely. I think you should maybe consider it at this point, if you're bringing in a player that you're going to be captaining, because you immediately half the goal that you would require, I guess. You were saying you're 4 points down. You're only 2 points down if you're captaining that player. And that's about the only benefit or not the only benefit, but I would say that's one of the kind of strongest arguments to make, that, you're obviously chasing a fixture. You're not just bringing some random player in who you think is going to play 90 minutes. It's not some Connor Cody type character. You're bringing in some sort of
exciting purchase.
Exciting purchase. Yeah, here I am trying to reach for a name like Harry Kane or something, but that's all I could think of. And I was like, well, that's not exciting. That's another Connor Cody. So, but yes, you get my point. I think captaincy in, yeah, fair enough. But like otherwise, maybe that expediting a tactical thing that, let's say, if they're trying to get City lads in for in a few weeks' time, maybe. But like,
yeah, I mean, maybe like Phil Foden or something like that, and just kind of, I mean, there's always the argument, just to give the other side of the coin, that you're buying a player to furnish you over the long term with their points, and removing a player who you feel was about to go on the downturn. Yeah, okay. I mean, you can look at a hit over the course of 5 games or something. Yeah, I can see where that comes from. And the other plus sides are that, of course, it's a gamble and it's fun when it pays off. And you've seen hundreds and hundreds of positive outcomes crowed about on Twitter. But these are often the exceptions rather than the rule, to be honest. I think most people who do take a hit, especially big hits, find that they don't do very well out of it. I'd love to see what the percentage are of profitable hits, actually. If FPL could ever provide me them, that'd be fantastic. But yeah, I mean, as you heard at the start of the pod, I did a decent hit this week, but I mean, really, in my history, I remember Nick used to go through my game week histories and find that I was just losing points year after year, bleeding them through taking hits. And yeah, it's never really the best thing to do. It's only if you want to accelerate that sort of transfer plan. But yeah, I think I probably share Nick's hesitancy. Whether I stick to it or not is a different matter, but I probably share Nick's hesitancy in terms of taking hits at this time of the season. Right, and the final question this week, the segue question as well. We always love one of these, from our friend of the pod at Langerschlanger92. He asks, who do I captain? He says, since the restart, I'm a potato at these decisions. But every week, he says, my total goes 10 plus above the FPL average, but I moved down the ranking. So he's getting 70, whereas the average is 60. He's moved down the rankings because he can't get that kind of captaincy balloon to float upwards. And this links very nicely, of course, our transfers and captains. What are we doing then, guys? How are we looking at it? Transfers wise, I heard, Nick, you mentioned the word Serge Aurier, the walking red card. I've seen a few Serge Aurier owners gloating on Twitter that they own him. Are you going to join their ranks? Is that what you're doing? And who are you captaining, to answer Langer's question?
Yeah, that is the plan, I think, to bring in Serge Aurier. Unfortunately, it doesn't work too well in terms of figuring out which defender to actually sell, because Soyuncu probably has the worst fixture this week, but then I might want him then for Bournemouth and Sheffield United. And Mason Holgate, who got injured tonight, I can't do a straight swap for Holgate to Aurier, so that's really annoying. I might have to put ice on that plan because of that, and look at who I can replace Holgate with directly. Looking around, just in the last 5 minutes, I've been looking at Craig Cathcart, which doesn't say much about a transfer if I'm bringing in Craig Cathcart this end of the season. So that'd be a pretty terrible transfer.
Can I just suggest someone just to mention him? There's one fellow I was looking at this week if I was going to buy Kane. I mean, I couldn't afford Aurier, so there's one guy I was looking at who was 4.9 and below, and that is Michael Craig in inverted commas Dawson at Watford. He's actually in this since the restart. He's actually second for XG amongst defenders. 8 shots, 7 shots in the box. Yeah, he's the target for their corners as he was at West Brom for Tony Pulis. So he could be an option for you, Nick. At 4.8, ex Spurs as well. Michael Dawson. I forget.
Yeah, I might look at Michael Smalling potentially, bring him in. Yeah, he used to bang in the goals for West Brom, didn't he? Yeah,
It's
normally
just
about
lost
4 a
all
season.
relevance now.
Yeah, no, actually, it's not a bad shout. I just spend that extra money on the Watford defender. I'm probably not going to be able to.
Norwich, Newcastle next two, both
Well,
at home.
that's why I mentioned Cathcart, because he's got the dog standard basic metric of which defender has most points this season.
But Watford's shooting since the restart, it's Dawson up front in first, then Will Hughes, then Messina as well. So you've got 2 defenders in there in terms of just like prolific, in inverted commas, shooters.
Yeah. To be fair, maybe Messina or Dawson. It's just, why am I talking about Watford defenders? Seems absolutely ridiculous. So I might do it just for fun now. Just now we've had this.
Put yourself up Dawson's Creek, Nick.
Yeah, perhaps. But yeah, I think moving swiftly on to who my captain is likely to be, I think I'm going to go for Kevin De Bruyne actually this week. He's one of those players that, like, if you own him in these types of fixtures, it's a bad thing to own him and not captain him, and you don't want him to score points because his effective ownership goes up to about 150, 160%. And I've hardly captained him this season. I'm not interested in any of the Liverpool assets. I think the only other option out there would be Bruno Fernandes. As we said, he's only blanked once in the 9 fixtures since joining Manchester United. But I don't know. I feel like I'm already tripled up on the United attack if I play Greenwood, and I don't know if I want to be quadrupled up. And as we said, Aston Villa have been a little bit tighter. So I think I'm probably going to go for De Bruyne in this instance.
Possibly De Bruyne for me as well, unless I actually decide to get Kane. Like, look, the fact of the matter is that when you're at 860 odd K, you need to do something drastic, and I kind of feel like doing something drastic. I think there was a point before the old break occurred in the season where I was starting to think, okay, I really need to attack this. And then we came back after the restart and I used my transfers and I tried to plan something, and it's just obviously just not worked either. So I'm starting to think I'll just start, really ruthlessly attacking again and just taking my hits and just going for it. So that would be Salah to Mahrez and Jimenez to Kane and just going for it, if so.
Ooh, high risk. Second time, no. I think every time you've spoken high risk. I think it'd be good if someone did do it. Someone did follow my Operation Target Bournemouth to the end stag. Maybe it is time for you to step up and do it. I guess. I don't know.
It will turn into Operation Barbarossa if I do it.
Oh, one of the history nerds there. Along with Operation Sea Lion earlier on. If there was a theme this week, it would be failed historical campaigns. Right. For me this week, just to answer, I guess, Langer's question, Willem Donk for Ira Fraga. I think my captain is going to be the opposite. I think I'm going to go for Bruno because of what Nick was saying, because I think that, everyone's going to go for De Bruyne. I know everyone's going to go for De Bruyne, but I guess I want to make a slight difference, in which case I should probably go for Bruno. I think there's only 2 options for me this week, who are Bruno and De Bruyne. I think I'm going to try to go for the second highest owned option, the second best priest for Father Ted fans out there. I think that I'm probably going to go that way. It kind of worked out with Stags waving the island flag now. It kind of worked out that way with Aubameyang, going for the second kind of or third highest owned captain. Obviously, Bruno's hugely owned, but I think it might just be a good thing to go that way in the face of De Bruyne. I don't know. It may get to tomorrow. I was about to say it may get to the end of the week. Obviously, it gets to tomorrow evening, and I may be like, oh God, I can't go without. But at the moment, I've got Bruno Fernandes. I'm determined to get a captain haul from Bruno Fernandes until I embark on phase 2 of Operation Target Bournemouth next week with rat-faced Jamie Vardy. Right, that's sort of this week, I think.
Yep, thank you very much. We were Who Got the Assist. Thanks for listening, and we will be with you extremely soon.
Very soon indeed. Our next pod's going to be on Thursday, so it's going to be yet another quick turnaround record.
Cool. I'm off to edit this now and hopefully be in your ears in a non-invasive way come the time you wake up. Hope to shooting game week 34 nonetheless, and we'll speak to you very, very, very soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Salon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?